Exit Slips, a lifetime of teaching in 10 sticky notes. 6. To school. A fishing expedition in the summer of 2007 resulted in one of the great catches of a lifetime. This idea would sound nuts to most, a fishing trip in search of a white whale. Fueled by imagination and a cocky assuredness, Andy and I wrote the following email to a powerful media executive in Chicago. Historian Gary Wills wrote, "Americans are intellectually autochthonous, having no pedigree except that of an idea." We pitched an idea that would involve the two regular guys, two teachers, serving the largest CBS affiliate as not just news commentators but educators, explaining what the news means. Our idea was to make the complex simple and the confusing clear, to an audience that no longer felt nightly news spoke to them. The email ended with a Mona-cared line, "We are governed not by armies and police, but by ideas." The germ of this idea had been percolating for years. Andy and I had been convinced for some time that our classroom went far beyond the walls of our school. We did not content ourselves with airing programs just on our school's radio show. We sought out Chicago radio programming to discuss politics. We appeared as guests on a locally televised but nationally broadcast political talk show. We appeared on C-SPAN. All of these efforts affirmed our desire to make a real difference in the ever-expanding world of government education. For us, we thought school should always be in session. As our students were texting, Andy and I were nexting. Call us nuts. With sweaty palms, I pushed send. Not all of my nutty emails landed as planned, but this one did. The executive, who we will call Joe, responded in minutes. My blood pressure peaked when I read his rejoinder. Call my secretary for an appointment. Soon thereafter, we headed downtown in our finest studs. The meeting was to be held in one of the most recognized television studios in American history. CBS 2 Chicago was an iconic destination. As we entered the front doors, we imagined Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy walking through these same doors. The first televised presidential debate, the Nixon-Kennedy debate, was held here in September of 1960. The history of this place did not go unnoticed. All hanging on the wall as we entered were pictures of Siskel and Ebert. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert were local movie critics who took their brand to a nationally syndicated audience by providing the currency in movie reviews every Saturday night. A thumbs up by either Siskel or Ebert could make or break a movie's prospective box office. Their Hollywood headshots, looking right at Andy and I in that hallway, had them both giving us 2 thumbs up. Joe's office was unlike any office we had ever been in. Beyond the photos of television personalities adorning the walls, Emmy's statuary could be seen everywhere. One in particular caught our eye. It was an Emmy given to the Oprah show. Next to it was a picture of Oprah with Joe. On the photo, Oprah had written, "Thanks, Joe, for finding me." Joe had discovered Oprah, and here were 2 high school teachers asking for the same treatment. Crazy. The secretary was pleasant and said, "Joe will be with you in a minute." Andy and I sat, feeling a bit uncomfortable, in the most comfortable office furniture one could buy. On a table between us was a fancy vase filled with walnuts, acorns, and hazelnuts. I looked at Andy, pointing at the vase, and asked, "What do you see?" "What do you mean?" he asked. Again, I pointed at the vase and asked him with even more determination, "What do you see?" Seeds. Precisely. When 2 souls connect, it is magical. Most of our colleagues considered Andy and I as being nuts. We were crazy. We were full of ourselves. Why would 2 teachers want to take their brand beyond the classroom? What most others saw as nuts, Andy and I saw as seeds. With great power comes great responsibility. We dreamt of being more than just 2 teachers with a classroom full of students. We were 2 teachers with no fancy suits, no fancy words. Just plain talk about issues you need to know. Everyone needs to know. Seeds grow, nuts, not so much. Andy and I appreciated China's performance metric when assessing their workers. Initially, it looks fairly routine. Unsatisfactory, satisfactory, good, excellent. But they add one more level. Famous. To be famous is not a vain pursuit. It simply means to be known by many. This appeal dawned on me after a parent open house conversation I had dozens of times. Parents would often say, "I wish I could take your class." Well, why couldn't they? Why not expand my political acumen to a wider audience? Why couldn't Andy and I become famous? When Joe called us into his office, he was everything and more than what we expected. He was tan, dressed in a $2,000 blue sport coat with a pocket square that stole your attention. Most memorably, however, he was wearing what looked like velvet slippers on his feet. To pull those off, you had to be really cool. Joe was all of that and more. And now Andy and I were sitting at his feet. For one of the first times in my life, I was speechless. My mouth was dry. Thankfully, Joe had done this before. He roared at me, "What the hell does autochthonous mean?" He loved our email. It grabbed his attention, but so did our idea. He loved it. A couple of weeks later, Joe invited us to lunch with the relevant producers and web content directors. He was sold, but could he sell our idea to join the CBS 2 team as two teachers explaining the news to his soldiers on the ground? As we walked into the swanky business lunch spot where Joe commanded a private booth with his name on it, he whispered to me, I haven't been this excited since the 1960 debate." Gulp. I barely could eat my salad. When the time came, Joe asked Andy and I what we would want to be called if the network brought us on board. For this, I had planned. With a carefully rehearsed dramatic pause, I reached into my coat pocket and found an index card. I flipped the card on the table for all to see. In large block letters, it said, CBS 2 School. Joe and everybody else effing loved it. For 5 years, Andy and I posted daily videos and blogs explaining the nightly news on CBS. We occasionally appeared on live broadcasts. We were credentialed CBS personnel covering the 2008 Democratic and Republican national conventions. Not sure how we kept up with the demand for daily content as we did. We had our sights for an even bigger audience, CBS National News. And then tragedy hit. The real estate crash of 2008 hit Joe hard. An ill-fated real estate deal in the Loop cost the local CBS affiliate too much. Joe paid the price with his job. We stayed on for a couple of extra years, but our patron was no longer able to speak up for us. After 5 fantastic years, CBS 2 School ended. Ovid, in Metamorphosis, summed up our feelings. He loved to roam through unimagined places, by the banks of undiscovered rivers, and the joy of finding wonders made his labor light. We never worked harder. We never grew more professionally. Seeds are so much better than nuts.